Okay, if we could bring the meeting to order. Great. Welcome everybody. Given that we were previously meeting on a monthly basis, this feels like a nice long break. It's been a little bit longer, but it's good to see everybody. I'd like to ask for approval of the agenda, but before I do, just note that there is one addition in the closed session to deal with an HR matter. Can I get a
motion as amended to approve as amended?
Select declarations of conflict of interest. I know we have stuff on the record, right?
The same.
Reaffirm the same.
Same. No longer an issue, sort of.
Oh, no longer? Anyone else? Okay, and can I get approval of the previous minutes? Any corrections or comments? Okay. So it is a fuller table here today, which is great. And so that I know that our just current panelists are really delighted to welcome our new panelists. It's great to have you on board, and I thought perhaps we might go to each and give us a chance to introduce yourselves. And as I say, we're really happy to have you on board.
Hi everybody, my name is Karen Gomez. I'm coming here from the city of Guelph, where I work on what I think is a very exciting project called, not used to that echo. I work on a program called the Municipal Innovation Exchange, which we hope will have deep implications to the municipal sector and how we procure innovation and get ready for the wave of smart cities.
So my name is Cal Villamam. I wear multiple hats, so I run a software company that specializes in data identification. I'm also a professor at the University of Ottawa. And I've been working there in data identification, like health data and other types of data for the last 50 years or so.
I'm Diane Reynolds. I work with IBM in their risk analytics group as a data scientist.
Great. Well, thanks to all three of you for being willing to commit to the panel. You're coming in just as a lot of the heavy lifting, I think, is about to take place. And so we're definitely grateful for the assistance. I don't have a lot of remarks other than to say that it's been as always, it seems, it's been a busy stretch since we last met. And some really useful civic labs that we will have a chance to talk about, as well as, I think, a good example of how the working groups can function. And we'll hear more in the working group reports, but the process that we had to help identify new panelists and then recommend them to Waterfront Toronto, I thought worked sort of precisely as I think we'd hope these working groups would work. So thanks to those who are on the governance working group for their participation in that process. I'll hand it over to you.
Great. Thank you very much, Michael. And before we get started, too, the other person I thought we should introduce to the whole group is Vance, who's just going up to the front right now. Vance Lofton has joined us at Waterfront Toronto for approximately 2.5 to 3 weeks now. And Vance, did you want to just give folks a little bit of your background as well so they know where you came from?
Sure. So, let me get back to me. So I'm Vance Lofton. Before this was with the Office of the Privacy Commissioner of Canada. So I was there for about 7 years in kind of a variety of roles. I was an investigator, did a lot of stakeholder outreach work, and most recently business advisory work. I was actually the point person on this file for the office until I got conflicted out for obvious reasons. So yeah, that's me.
Great. Well, thank you, Vance. So I have a very brief management report update that I wanted to share with you, just to highlight some of the information that has happened since the last time that we've met. As Michael alluded to, it has been a busy time. The slides are showing us a little small. I apologize. They are in your board package. We have had our 2 civic labs, which were very well attended. The first one was on the notion of the Civic Data Trust, and the second was on our IP proposals and things like that we would look at moving forward. Both of those data or Civic Labs had approximately 50 to 60 people in attendance, and over 250 and to 400 people have viewed the stream either live or after the session. So there was a fairly good uptake in terms of watching that session. They will also, both of those streams will be available for folks after the session as well. We've had the working group meetings, the panel governance nomination committee meeting, which has led to our wonderful 3 new panel members, an architecture session on March the 25th, and an evaluation criteria meeting has been scheduled for April the 12th with KPMG to go through the more detailed evaluation criteria that have been set forth for the MIDP. We've continued to do our info sheet information campaign with the civic digital literacy component to it, which is complementary to our civic labs. And Nicole Swearin and her team have been instrumental in that piece as well. Nicole's here with us in addition if anyone has questions about any of our civic engagement activities. We have completed our new panelist recruitment, and the manager of digital governance, Vance, has joined us. We have also retained additional external legal, who is here with us today in the room, and that's Tim Banks. Tim, I don't know if you wanted to just say hello and introduce yourself briefly.
Hello, I'm a lawyer and I practice at a boutique firm called Innovation.
So Tim has been brought on to help us with the IP portions of the MIDP as well. And just to give you a bit of a trajectory coming up, we have our public consultation on digital issues that has been scheduled for the week of May the 13th. I believe it's actually on May the 14th. Location and agenda is still being worked through, but please plan to attend if it will fit within your calendars. And I may tap on a number of you again for speaking roles and so on for that session as well. So any questions about the activities since February's meeting until today? Okay. We'll switch over to the working group reports.
Okay, so let's start with the working group reports. Invite Pamela to update us on governance.
So I'm going to speak on behalf of the governance working group. We had the lovely task of trying to work and recruit our new members of our panel. I would say it was our first kind of igniting of working in that way. And so the panel is me and Mark and Michael, Waterfront Toronto staff, created the draft for the new participants. We all boosted it by sending it out to our networks. We had a long list. We all individually reviewed the potential people who wanted to join us. And when we gathered together to sort out where our preferences ranked, there was a really great constellation of agreement around the 3 people that we're very lucky to have invited to have joined us. So it felt like a good constructive process. It also helped us start to think ahead to what other kinds of holes we might want to fill. We have 1 remaining seat that's open, and so we've kept a space at the table for, as our collective wisdom begins to evolve around what kinds of knowledge we need at the table. We've got room to fill 1 more spot later on if we need to. But I would say I felt like the process worked well. It was collegial, and certainly helped us continue, I think, what we started with, which was trying to gather people with interesting expertise at the table to help with a complex project like this one. So welcome to our new people. Thank you for saying yes. And I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone has any. So.
What is the remaining skill set? You think
We're not sure.
Oh, you're not?
Yeah, no, we just realized that we want to keep a space because without seeing the MIDIP and without being able to see the full set of work that's coming, we wanted to be able to wait and see if there were gaps in our knowledge. We could fill them at this table, but also through experts, smaller subgroups. So. Anybody else? Mark?
No, it was great.
Okay.
It was very consensus based.
Yes.
All right, that's good.
Okay.
I got nothing.
Thanks.
Great. Architecture, Curtis, anything?
Yeah, I mean, we met in Waterloo. Thank you for everybody who experienced the drive that I get to experience every time we have one of these meetings. And yeah, just sort of talked, I guess, high level about different models for architecture. I don't know that we concluded anything coming out of that meeting, but I think had a good debate. It's pretty candid. Got some ideas on the table. Lots of notes were taken, not by me, so I don't know if any of those will turn into something. But we did leave with a picture on a whiteboard that sort of outlined a concept, at least, around what architecture could mean. don't know if there's anything else you want to. Those were there. Anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I think you also test drove that concept at the IP session.
Yeah,
So if people want to take a quick look at it,
it's on the video. Yeah.
it's on the video in Curtis's section. So Curtis's presentation at the IP Civic Lab is worth a few minutes of your time, if not the rest of it. The rest of it is as well, but it's a long session.
Hey man,
Not
thanks
to
a
be
lot.
misunderstood, especially Michael's part.
Is there an outcome from that session that will that provide any input into our critique, our comments, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, for me, we had a really good conversation, but I don't know that we took away anything sort of concrete other than the diagram. We could write that up and bring it to this group, either in a meeting or just offline.
We can distribute it.
If that'd be useful. Yeah.
We can certainly distribute
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, and I think the concepts that are in there are part of what we'll want to test, whatever the digital proposals are here, as to whether they, in fact, meet some of what we, I think, identified as architectural needs in terms of facilitating innovation.
So-
Sorry.
No, I was gonna say, so maybe like I put that slide together, so maybe I'll circulate that to the architecture subcommittee members just to make sure that everyone thinks it says what we talked about, and then we can circulate it to the rest of the group.
Is there a do we think that committee will meet again, or was it a one-off?
Yeah, I think we're all happy to keep meeting about it. I think the thing that I think maybe we need some direction from this body on is sort of like what do we want to see out of that group? Like, do we want to see a definitive, like, this should be the architecture, or do we want to see here's 5 different approaches we could take to architecture? Like, I think some. Yeah, I mean, I have opinions, as I'm sure anyone who's worked with me knows, but I think just some direction on sort of what exactly are we hoping to get back from that group would be good.
I mean, my own thought, Curtis, would be that I think the picture's important, but I think the principles are more important than the picture.
Yeah.
So I think when we circulate something, I think we should articulate what
Right.
the principles are. So, for example, in terms of, we had a lot of discussion about network and openness and the need to make sure that no one captures data at the network level that in a sense privatizes the data. So I think there's a bunch of principles around different layers that are important, whatever the diagram says, and I think those should feed the evaluation criteria.
No, I was going to say, just from my memory of the slide that I saw, what did you say? It probably is a good kind of framing mechanism because it's got different. If it's the one I'm thinking of, the layers, application layers, sensors, and it's one in which we can actually use as part of our evaluation of the MIDP is to cover all of these elements. Who's doing what? So I like it for that purpose.
So yeah, and then in terms of the principles, I mean, one of the other things we spent a fair amount of time covering was how certain types of and the word right now is escaping me. There's the what's the concept in the RFP, Christina, that deals with the, I want to say sacred cows, but that's definitely not the technical
The
term.
must-dos?
There was even a more technical term than that. The sort of the things
Goals
that they
and
could sort of
objectives?
propose. No, the things that they could propose to say
Those, okay.
purposeful solutions. So there are certain types of purposeful solutions that if allowed to sort of happen would create certain frictions which could sort of impede other business models. So we can maybe include in the write-up some of that stuff, some of those conversations as well, like sort of watch out for these types of things that might get introduced in the architecture.
What else? Okay, our third group criteria.
You'll note in your calendars there was a scheduled call. I believe it's April the 12th. I'm pretty confident. I think most of you will have said that you're going to attend. I'm not sure if all of you have responded, but could you check your calendar for that? And that criteria call is something that we will then discuss.
And if any of you wanted to come here, we will have a space available, but we'll also make the web connection available for folks who need to connect remotely.
I should have asked, is there anybody on the phone? Apparently not.
Michael, I've got folks in Ottawa saying they're dialed in, but the moderator hasn't joined.
Oh.
So I don't know if they have the wrong number or if, in fact, it just hasn't been.
With Julie.
I've got it.
Hello.
Good morning.
Morning. Who all do we have on the conference bridge?
Anyone else? Okay, our apologies for the oversight. We started a few minutes ago and you've missed a few basic updates, but no substantive decisions yet taken while you're on the call. Sorry about that, our mistake. But we've just now completed the 3 working group reports section, so we're actually quite a bit ahead of schedule. The management report was as found in the materials, and I'm going to hand it over to Christina to talk about an overview of the process on the Sidewalk Labs review.
Great. So what I'm doing here is just actually bringing forward what was actually discussed in closed session last time and has been discussed now with our board of government partners to be able to actually present into the public session, so there's clarity around the role of DSAP and the approach that we're taking for feedback from DSAP into the MIDP evaluation process. So in the previous meeting, we had discussed the notion of having a formal report coming out of this group that will be made public. The DSAP group will be providing ultimately review and comments on the following 2 pillars in its most substantive way, which is the digital innovation pillar as well as the intellectual property considerations. Admittedly, there may be adjacent materials from other focus areas that may be relevant to this group, and we'll try and make sure that those are flagged and brought forward appropriately to help sort of streamline the process, but this group will have all of the materials available at its disposal as well. In the case of the digital innovation pillar, you will be acting as Waterfront Toronto's subject matter expert and advisors to management who will be conducting the initial phase of the evaluation. So rather than having a single subject matter expert, because there's such a diversity of expertise around this table that helps us to better reflect the types of proposals and information that's coming forward through the MIDP, this will be the main vehicle by which we'll provide sort of advice to Waterfront Toronto. The working groups will obviously play a very important role of that, and the architecture model in particular, in helping to ensure that we've created an architecture or supporting an architecture that is consistent with the goals and objectives within the RFP, and to make sure that the input is comprehensive on this piece as well. You are going to be receiving a confidential briefing and the preliminary draft of the chapter, which you have received, and begin the due diligence process, providing high-level feedback to us to identify areas of concern. Sidewalk Labs will be here today to answer any questions that you have about the material that was received thus far. We don't anticipate any further materials to be coming forward to this group until such time as the public chapter is available. So we're trying to also streamline that process between receipt of the material and public release to alleviate some of the concerns that we've been hearing through our public consultation process as well. There will not be a scored review per se, not a numerical score of the MIDP from DSAP, but rather it will be comprehensive commenting that will be in the form of a consensus-based report, but there will be an opportunity for a minority report as discussed, where there will be that ability to flag any really material concerns that this group has that might need to be considered moving forward. And this report will be public as a part of our overall commitment to openness and transparency from this group. Are there any questions about that piece or anything that has not been captured properly at this moment?
Yes.
And the criteria committee will continue to kind of flesh this out to make sure that there's a comprehensive approach once we get there.
Yes, I have a question.
Yes,
Two
Charles.
So where you mentioned that we will receive a confidential briefing and preliminary draft, is that the one that we've already received, or we're receiving another version?
As to the best of my knowledge, this will be the final draft version of any materials that come forward, and then it will go into the public release version, and that will help also to eliminate some of the concerns that we have had about being able to pull in our extended networks for additional advice.
So this will be our only draft opportunity to provide comments on it.
Prior to the public draft,
Prior to the public draft.
but not the final submission.
And the second is there was some conversation in previous meetings where we wondered whether there was some digital content that was germane to our expertise that might be in the rest of the plan, not just in the chapters specifically around digital innovation. Would we be seeing any of that material?
So 2 comments on that. The first is that we asked them specifically to embed any of the relevant content from the other chapters into the digital innovation chapter. So there's a lot more note of specific applications and so on that came forward in this latest iteration of the chapter. That being said, the full public version will have the more robust information perhaps on each of the impacts of those proposed technologies. So we're going to try and get them to map out where you can refer back to in the broader MIDP for more information throughout each of those examples. So it's a both and situation on this. There's also a request that came forward from the last meeting in terms of getting a more robust technical architecture perspective into the MIDP than what has been provided in the text version of the chapter. Sidewalk is currently going through and identifying what they have available for each of the different elements that are suggested in the MIDP that they can surface. May not go into the big public version of the chapter because it will be more of a technical component of it, but it will be available to this group for reference. Does that answer the questions for you, Charles?
Yes, thank you.
Anyone else? We have Slido, but at this stage. Okay.
So the only other thing to note is that we do have our series of 2019-2020 DSAP dates scheduled. But we can we may add a few extra dates on an ad hoc basis to deal with the MIDP once we know that it's landed and that the public version is out there, so we can continue to discuss those pieces as well.
Yep.
Do we know what what the other chapters are? Do we have like a index or executive summary so we can see whether
we could share the updated table of contents? They basically map to the pillars that have been consulted on. So sustainability, buildings, mobility, public realm, sort of the urban elements of it. This is the only technology-centric chapter is the digital innovation chapter.
Okay. Well, we've gone much faster than anticipated, which leaves more time for discussion later. So with that, I guess we'll have a motion to go into this session. Got a seconder? Okay. If that's the case, I need a motion to move into open session. Okay, before we do that, let me open the door, because there's literally someone who's been waiting all day.
So Mark, you motioned, who seconded it?
This is just a motion to adjourn, right?
It is.
I need a motion to adjourn.
Kevin.
On every charge. Okay, thanks very much.